So welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for being here, and a special thank you to our two BIA, which stands for I always mix this up with Bureau of Indian Affairs, and that's not it. Board of Immigration Appeals. There we go. I always have to think of both, but yes, so a special thank you, of course, to our Board of Immigration Appeals BIA accredited representatives for being here this evening with us as our two panelists to answer the really wonderful questions that you all sent in ahead of time. So we'll be transitioning now into asking both Frank and Clay, who are the said accredited representatives, these questions based on their experiences doing this kind of work with Sin Barreras. So to start out with, so we all have a good framework, I'm going to ask Clay to just let us know what is a BIA accredited representative, and then why did you choose to be one?
A nonprofit that wants to provide legal advice to immigrants or represent them in legal proceedings either has to have a lawyer on staff, or you have to have accredited people that are accredited by the Board of Immigration Appeals and U.S. Department of Justice. That's who accredits us. Sin Barreras is also a recognized organization with them as well. How I became BIA, when we started in 2012, we started in March of 2012. DACA came out in June of 2012. So right away I got doing the DACA clients. I wasn't accredited at that time, so we would do big classroom and they would fill out their own forms and I would go through the applications question by question with them. And then we found out about becoming BIA accredited, and Frank and I went ahead and same year and got accredited so that we could give immigration advice. The biggest thing is that's probably one of the biggest needs the immigrants have, is they need help in immigration. So it made sense for us to get accredited.
And why did you choose to be accredited?
Myself?
Yeah.
Like just because I was already practicing kind of with the DACA kids, and I figured it was a way that Sin Barreras could make a little bit of income and we'd be able to help our clients better. We'd be able to offer more services.
And Frank, could you tell us also why you chose to be an accredited representative, but then could you let us know what did you have to do to actually get that accreditation?
Oh, the answer to the first question is kind of two parts. The first is that I spent, you know this, but the group listening won't. I spent 20 years in Latin America. 3 each in in Honduras and Ecuador, and 5 each in Bolivia and the Dominican Republic. And I'm not a Latino, but I love the Latin culture. And when I came back to retire, I was looking for a place to use some of my skills, and became aware of Sin Barreras in a very peculiar way. I won't bother with it, but I saw a way to pay back to the Hispanic Latino culture, all of the friendship and the love that I have for that culture, and that culture showed to me and my family over those many years. So there was a personal desire to do something, and Sin Barreras helped me do that. And then to expand a little bit on Clay's comment, for the first 3 years or so, we both became accredited in 2016. For 2012, 13, 14, 15, we were doing a bunch of things. Barreras was doing a bunch of things. But as he said, the biggest need of the community is to assimilate, to become part of the new society that they have, either because they had to or because they wanted to, leave their own culture to come and join. And so citizenship is just such a huge goal, or green card, permanent resident status, or a work permit, or these various other things that we will be talking about maybe later on, is such a big, important thing for these tens of thousands of people that he and I in particular, but also others in the leadership cadre said, you know, this would be a really good thing for us to begin to do as one of our service offerings, is to offer immigration services that local immigration lawyers charge $5,000 and $6,000 and $8,000 for, at a 10th, 15th, 20th of that cost, to help people achieve their lifetime goals. So as to your second question, how to do it, both of us took a course that's offered by a local NGO called Clinic, a local non-government organization that has some affiliations to the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church, as probably most people know, is very, very big in assistance to the Hispanic community. And they offer a 8-week, 9-10-week course and 50 or 60 study hours that gives you the basics. And it's a course that's recognized by the Department of Justice. And you have to do, you have to attend all of the lectures, and you have to do all of the assignments, pre-lecture assignments, post-lecture assignments, to familiarize yourself with this labyrinthian law that is immigration law. And then after you take the course, you have to pass the test. And if you pass the test, if you have studied hard enough and got lucky, then you are allowed to apply through a local non-government organization. You can't do it by yourself. You have to be part of a voluntary organization. But you are allowed to apply to the Department of Justice, showing not only your study and passing this test, but also what is language that is used in immigration law is good moral character. You have to prove to the government that you are an upstanding citizen on various dimensions. And then when you do that and then get approved by that, then the difficulties really begin. Because the first client that walks in the door, you realize how little you know, how much you studied and how little you know. Anyway, I'm way over my time. Sorry. I hope that was useful.
Yeah, most certainly. Yes, I have a little follow-up question. When you were talking about being able to, prove your, it sort of sounds like worthiness. Can you give like an example of the kinds of things they were looking for? Like what did you, how did you prove that?
I had been doing other volunteer work. I had a career of working for a nonprofit overseas. I was a regular churchgoer. I got, and at that point, both Clay and I had already been working for Barreras for 3 years. I was able to get strong letters of recommendation from a couple of local attorneys, as well as the executive leadership of Barreras. And and I have a reasonably decent credit score, and so I included my credit score. They don't really tell you exactly what you need to submit, or at least I don't remember that they do. But you just have to convince them that, and these are very smart, well-learned people, you know, that your heart is in the right place and you're not out to, anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, we had to send our resumes with it.
Yeah, I
if
was going to say
remember
like
right.
a CV and credit
Yeah,
score.
and we had to send reference letters, but Frank's right. You had, and I believe we did background checks. Did they not, Frank? I'm pretty sure they did background. No?
Not at that time. Later on, I had to, but no, I didn't do one. But certainly a background check would be a good thing to do. Yes.
Okay, thanks. So now moving on to the questions that were submitted by our volunteers. The first one for Clay: what is your number one, starting off with something fun, what is your number one complaint or challenge about being a BIA rep?
I think Frank kind of added to a little bit on his last comment. This is the only thing I've ever done in my life that with all the training I could possibly have, I still couldn't be 100% confident of what I'm doing. I can send a case following all their guidelines, think that it should be approved. There's no reason that it shouldn't be approved, but USCIS agent has the bottom line on approving that or not. So things can happen up there. Sometimes you'll get they'll want additional evidence that they might or might not have had in what you sent them up. So there's things that they'll do to delay stuff. Yeah, I guess that's the biggest complaint, is that you never really know if what you're sending in is going to be accepted. You hope, you think, but until it comes through, you're never quite sure.
Thank you. And now, Frank, do you think most anyone could be a BIA accredited representative, or what do you think are the qualities necessary to really be an effective BIA rep?
I like this question. I wrote down 3 things. Compassion. You have to feel for, I believe you have to feel for your people, your clients. Some of them come to you with heartbreaking stories. They are, in some cases, they're trusting the dream of their life. They are entrusting to you. So you have to feel for them, I think, and accept that responsibility that you have in your hands their life's dream. Kind of drawing on what both of us have said, persistence. You have to be persistent. Some of my cases have taken 2 years and aren't yet done. Some of them have taken 100 hours. 100 hours over the course of months and years, and are not yet done. Some of them are fast, are only 3 or 4 hours, but many of them just go on forever and ever, to say nothing of the 8-month or 9-month or 10-month wait after you've done everything that you can. So you have to have persistence. And then the third thing, man, you better have a lot of free time, because there is a huge need. Clay and I have, at this point, assisted 385, 400 clients over the course of the last 6 years. Thousands of hours invested in conversations and discussions and investigations and data collection and photocopying and filling out those blinking forms, and the demand is constantly growing. This week, the word is getting out in the Afghani community that Barreras is offering these services. And we have Afghanis that are beating down the door to avail of our services, to say nothing of the, as I say, the 350, 400 Latinos, mostly Latinos, who we have served with hundreds, thousands more being able to avail of our services. So compassion, sense of responsibility. This is not a job this is not a job for somebody that's going to dabble. It's not. It's just too important for our clients. Persistence and lots of time to dedicate to the work.
Thank you. That's very insightful. Thanks. And now, Clay, for an undocumented person with outstanding references, what are the steps to get a green card? Or another one I kind of grouped with this are, what are some factors that prevent someone from obtaining a green card?
There's numerous ways to get a green card. You can get a green card through family. You can get green card through employment. You can get it for kids through special immigrant juvenile status. You can get it through refugee or asylum. Human trafficking or victim abuse, you can also get green cards. Pretty much all of them, one way, shape, or form, requires you to have a sponsor of some kind or another. Be it family, you have to have a immediate family member that is either a citizen or a legal permanent resident that can sponsor you to apply for your immigration status. To get it through employment, you have to have an employer that's willing to sponsor you. Refugee or asylum, same thing. Refugee, they are brought here through a refugee company that helps place them here and helps them with all their needs once they're here. Human trafficking, the crime-related ones, they're a little different. Their sponsor is actually the police department or the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, because that's who's going to get them their information that they're going to need to complete their applications, because what they've done is they've helped prosecute in some type of crime. I believe you had asked something about DACA with that question. Is that one, or is that after? Is that later on?
Yeah, well, just broadly, the individual is asking factors that prevent someone from obtaining really anything like a DACA or a green card.
The biggest thing is coming into the country and not being inspected. That's probably one of the hardest things to overcome for us in immigration. Two is not having a sponsor. Just because you have kids that are U.S. citizens, that don't make them your sponsor. They have to be 21 years old before they can sponsor you. So you have to really have an immediate family member that's willing to sponsor you, that is a citizen or legal permanent resident, or there's really not a way to do it through family. DACA is not a green card. All DACA is deferred action for 2 years. What that means is that DACA are kids that came here to this country with their parents. All of them were under 18. Most of them were infants. For the most part, they all entered without inspection because their parents brought them into the country. But the only thing they get is it's deferred from being picked up by ICE for 2 years. And they have to renew it every 2 years. So they get deferred from persecution, and then they get a work permit, which the work permit allows them to legally work here in the United States. It allows them to get a social security card and their driver's license. Okay. And those are the main things that people want from the green card as well. I make a joke that I've never heard from any of my clients when they got their green card. I heard from all of them when they got their work permit and their social security number that they could now go to work and go get their driver's license. But yeah, I don't know that any of them ever got a green card, even though I know they did. They don't call when they get that. They want the driver's license. They want to be able to work.
Yeah. So it sounds like, if I got that right, for the first part of the question, that when you say enter the country like uninspected, that would mean, for the portion of the question about for an undocumented person who's trying to get a green card, essentially that's the biggest hurdle, is the fact that they are undocumented, or yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that they didn't stop by the border and get inspected or paroled in.
Okay. And are there options for that person, or?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's one, like for DACA, they can get advanced parole where they can go out of the country and come back in. The other one is a waiver. Same kind of scenario with the waiver. Once the waiver is approved, they'll go back to their country and they'll come back. Immigration goes by your last time through the border. So even though they came in undocumented years ago, if they go out, come back in the right way, then they're now inspected, and they're not undocumented any longer that way, or they're not, they've been inspected.
Okay.
I would add something, and it's going to sound a little bit different from Clay, although everything that he said is exactly right. But I read in the question something that I hear a lot of, even from our clients. For an undocumented person with outstanding references, has nothing to do with it. Outstanding references, as long as you're armed, if you don't have a family member sponsoring you, it's not worth a hoot. You can't. The door that lets you in is a very narrow door. Clay listed other alternatives. DACA is super, but DACA is only temporary and can't lead to citizenship. It's just temporary, however long, however many times it gets. The door that you can get in is only through, as he said, a sponsor, a family member. If you don't have a family member, the best references in the world aren't going to get you in.
Does it have to be a family member, or can it be a friend?
Has to be an immediate family member.
Family. And people, we get this kind of question lots and lots and lots. Oh, but I'm a good person. The law doesn't care. If you don't have a family member, and even if you do have a family member, the waiting list for Indians or Filipinos, some Mexicans, depending upon the class that you fall into, is 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it depends on how immediate that family member is. If it's a spouse or a parent, it's kind of quick. If it's a brother or sister, you're talking, like Frank said, 20 years, 30 years to be able to just have a visa available for them to apply for.
Wow. So
there are these various little tiny sub doors that U visa or T visa, if you're trafficked or if you're a victim of domestic violence, there are these little doors, but the big door is very limited, And if you don't have somebody who is already a citizen or already a legal permanent resident, there is nothing. There is no alternative.
Okay. And then let's see, that sort of takes us, well, we'll just bridge into the next question for Frank, which was approximately what percentage of immigration related applications that Barreras submits are approved? And because that's probably just going to be a number, this was related to it. What do you say to people whose applications are turned down? how do you handle it, especially for those whose lives are in danger?
Okay, so this is, I hesitate to answer this question because I don't want to jinx us. Our approval rate, Clay's and my, God bless us, our approval rate is about 96%. We have only lost 4 or 5 cases out of the 400 that we have dealt with. And I don't want to jinx us. Part of that is because the only cases that we will take, that isn't the right way to say it. We are so careful in taking cases that if we know beforehand that it's not gonna, there is no chance, of course we don't take it. So our Clay for years had every single DACA petition, every single one was approved. In those early years, every single one. There isn't anybody in the country that could have that would say that. So our approval rate, those 400 for whom we have provided services, we only lost 4 or 5. And Clay, feel free to correct me if you don't share the same. The reason it isn't a particularly nice reason, but people understand, folks, it's out of our control. It's the government that took this decision. I mean, it's really sad, and we would love to help you, but you didn't qualify because of this or that. And we feel for you, part of the compassion that I was talking about earlier. We would love to have it different, but it is the government and the strictness of the law that has had this happen to you. And then, so how do you handle it for those whose lives are in danger? You have to feel compassion. You have to feel compassion. I have in another event narrated where because of a mistake of mine, a young hairdresser from a Latin American country's life was in danger if she had been deported because of my mistake. And that's what wakes you up in the middle of the night with a cold sweat, wondering whether you have made those kinds of mistakes. We were able to appeal her case and won the appeal, and that doesn't happen very often. And she is now a very happy green card holder, as Clay says, paying no attention to the green card, but delighted with the fact that she can drive around now in her own car. So sort of various dimensions to, I hope that answered the question.
Yes,
the question
very much. And it's actually
we kind of know the guidelines. We just don't know if they'll approve them all the time. So that's really what the guideline is on if we go with the case. We know what they're looking for. We know if they've committed too many immigration violations that they're not going to approve it. But at the same time, we don't promise anything either because we can't. We are not in control of that. So that goes back to this is the only thing I've ever done where I don't feel confident in what I'm doing all the time,
Yeah, and Clay,
another way to look at it.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think Clay is already starting to answer even the next question about how do you determine when a case is something you can handle versus something that needs to be referred to an attorney.
I think if it's filling out forms, for the most part, if they meet the guidelines, Frank and I are very good about filling out the forms and stuff like that. I would say if Frank and I turn them down, they're not usually going to be able to go to an attorney to get any type anything done because they're going to get turned down there for the most part. Where an attorney comes into play is if they're in ICE and they're getting ready to be deported. When you're in that situation, there are different types of relief for immigrants that they can qualify for through court that are not available to Frank and I.
It might be useful too, and Clay, I pose the question to you as much as to me. How many, I think it might be useful to whoever wrote this question, how many people off the top of my head do I turn down compared to those that I accept? And I'm just sort of, I have no data, this is just sort of a stomach feeling. I would guess that there are another 25% of our clients that we don't take because they are not winnable cases.
I'd probably agree with that, Frank. That's probably pretty accurate. 1 out of 4.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the next question is for Frank. Do you think BIA accredited reps are here to stay, or do you envision the government doing away with them in the near future?
So this is the easiest question of the entire lot. I think it's BIA is definitely here to stay. Even under the horrors of 4 years of Trump, there was never any mention of the tax on taking away the BIA. There are thousands of us in the country, all of us volunteers, I won't say all, most of us volunteers, working for volunteer organizations, sending in tens of thousands of low-cost petitions, petitions prepared by families that wouldn't be able to afford an immigration lawyer. That is a benefit to our society. It's a benefit to our culture. It's BIA is definitely here to stay, and it's in the interests of the government. It isn't in the interest of the clients. It's better for everybody if the immigration system is working for the neediest people as well as for others less needy.
Yeah, in the United States, if you can't afford an attorney is supplied for you to go to court, not in immigration cases. If you can't afford an attorney, there is no attorney for you. So that's where BIA comes into play. We're all cheaper than an attorney. It's a way for them to be able to get services at a rate that they can afford. I mean, if they can't afford what Frank and I charge, we don't charge them anything. So it's the only way for them, some people, to get representation.
And Clay, how big is the risk for an undocumented parent to apply for DACA for their children?
I don't really know the answer to this question. When DACA rolled out originally, USCIS was never supposed to share any of that information with ICE. I had heard rumor of it that when Trump was in the White House, it got shared. But I do not know of any parents that have ever gotten picked up, because you know that those parents are all undocumented because the kids were undocumented. That's the whole purpose for DACA.
Yeah, so apparently there's not a lot out there
We were
that
told,
would let you know.
we were told,
I know that when I first started doing DACA, this was
The,
a hang up that I had. I wouldn't have applied for DACA right when it went out because of that reason. I mean, you're giving them basically your parents' information and address that they could come get them, knowing that they're all undocumented. But I had hundreds of them that came out and did it because the benefits of it outweighed the risk, I guess, to them.
Did you have an addition, Frank?
Yeah, as Clay says, there is no clear-cut answer. In the Obama administration, when it started, the separation was absolutely absolute, and they said that the one division of the government will not be allowed to access the others. There were all sorts of inroads made during the Trump years to that, and many other regular business, government business, etc. It doesn't seem to be, I think Clay has said it very nicely, the benefits are so vast compared to the risks that thousands of parents and children have taken the risk that it is worth it. And so far as we can tell, as far as the network immigration people that we are generally in, it doesn't seem to have been abused.
Thank you for adding that. And the next question is for you, Frank. What are some of the biggest policy challenges today that make your tasks of facilitating these citizenship processes most difficult? And they put in parentheses some that are less obvious.
Well, sort of, as I sketched out a response to this, I've already talked about the very narrow eligibility, you know? Mm-hmm. There are 800,000 undocumented, what's the figure for 800,000 undocumented people?
Oh, I don't know.
And as we said earlier, if you don't have a relative, you can't get in. I mean, you could be living here. We know people, we have clients who have been living here for 20 years. No chance. They pay taxes. They pay $14 billion in taxes a year, $14 billion, and get no benefit from it whatsoever. The law deliberately hard to achieve. Anybody that says they just should stand and get in line is woefully ignorant of, there is no line. There is no line. There is no way, if you don't have a relative, to get in, notwithstanding the fact that you own a home, you run a business, you sent your kids to school, your kids are Americans to all intents and purposes. So, and in the early days of the Biden administration, there was some talk about anybody who could show proof of being a resident here for 10 or 15 years might be given a path to citizenship. Poof, that's gone, gone. That idea is gone. Republican obstructionism in the Senate, no chance. So there has not been any meaningful change to Reagan era immigration law in 20 years. So anything would be an improvement. And there are some really relatively easy things to fix. There was talk in the Biden administration that if you had already been recognized by the government with the blood relationship, it's called the I-130 in our business. It's the mother being able to show the birth certificate of her daughter. If that relationship were already approved by the government, and there are 1 million of them, that would be sufficient, and they could show that they paid their taxes and they've been good, could be made opened, could be opened, disappeared, poof, gone. We're basically where we were 25 years ago in terms of initiatives on facilitating citizenship, improved citizenship processes. Sorry.
And I mean, you hear all the time from Republicans, let's just deport them, and that's not feasible either. It costs 12 grand a person to deport somebody on average. And there's so many undocumented people in our country, we couldn't financially deport all of them. So the only true solution is fix the immigration system that hasn't been changed in 25 years.
Thanks for that feedback. And Clay, what are some tips for navigating? Oh, go ahead.
Another thing that I thought to add to this is asylum. Just a little bit of data on asylum. There are waves, ebbs and flows of immigrants crossing the border. Now we're on an upswing. Asylum processes take 8 years. And the approval rate depends upon the area. In New York, the approval rate on an asylum case is about 60%, 60-70%. In Florida, the approval rate of asylum cases is 4%. And the national average of asylum cases is about 35 or 40%. 1 million people, only 40% of them are going to get approved. And the criteria for even being considered for asylum status is a labyrinth. There are 5 4 very clear criteria: gender, race, political opinion, and then there's one called particular social group that is so complex that there are volumes that are 2 inches thick and entire semesters worth of coursework at an immigration law school trying to figure out what particular social group means. Really a minefield.
Thanks. And I think I'm going to transition to the last question in the interest of time, and because I think the second to last, there's only one other question, which I think was mostly touched on in its own way through the other questions. So the last question, we'll just go ahead and start with you, Frank, and then Clay will also answer, which is, given the obstacles of our country's immigration system that you so well just laid out, what motivates you to continue this work as a BIA accredited representative?
Yeah, it's a really nice question. Is it better to curse the darkness than something good? And it depends about, as and I hope I haven't been overly negative on all of this, but you have, as a BIA, Clay and I both, you have the opportunity to change some people's lives in ways that satisfy their wildest expectation. You are helping them fulfill the dream that they undertook 25 years ago and came to this strange, big place. Satisfying people's lifetime dreams in the pit of your stomach is a wonderfully satisfying feeling. When in the early days, when I was loanies of people who I'd be in the courtroom when the judge had everybody raise their right hand and swear to defend the Constitution, and et cetera. And the sense of accomplishment of that, of having taken a mason, a bricklayer with very little English and very him to the point where he is now a US citizen. There is not a feeling like that. There are very few feelings in the world that are that satisfying. So that's why I keep at it.
And
Mine's probably the same reason. It's getting them the approval, getting their phone call of, you know, thanking you for how much you've done for them and their family's life. All makes it worth it. You know, I always say that I'm willing to help anybody that's willing to help themselves. And I really hold true to that. If they're willing to stick with me through all of it, I'm willing to do whatever I got to do to help them get through it.
Well, thank you. And I know Sim Barreras certainly thanks you for bringing this wealth of knowledge for all the reasons you mentioned at the beginning of why you became accredited representatives. We're certainly so happy that you all went through that process to be able to do these very things that you're talking about. So thank you for that, and thank you for answering all of these lovely questions that were sent in by our volunteers. And yes, I think that about does it.